Hi all, welcome to Inch online fashion designing class. So today let us learn how to sew a lining blouse using a cord piping. So for this you first need to lay out the lining on the wrong side of the blouse fabric as shown. Cut out the blouse with extras on all the sides and stitch at the edge of the lining to secure the lining to the main fabric. So cut out with extras on all the sides and stitch at the edge of the lining to secure the lining to the main fabric. So once the stitching is done, you check out whether the garment is flat without any creases and pulls, and then we need to cut out the extras on all the sides. So this is done on all the pieces. So as a beginner, I would recommend you to have the dart markings so that it would be easy for us to stitch. So similarly, cut out all the pieces. After cutting out the extras, the lining would look like this. So now treat the main fabric and the lining as one single piece. So similarly cut out the back piece the same way and the waistband too. Except for the sleeve, because sleeve I'm going to attach a cord piping to the round arm here. So I have pinned the lining right side facing right side of the main fabric, because I'm going to put the cord piping in between the two layers. I'm going to stitch it and turn it inside out. So let us learn how to make a cord piping. So for this I have taken a contrast piece of cross piece which is 1 inch wide. So for those who are following my video will know how to cut a cross piece and how to make joins on a cross piece. So for those who are new, can check out my previous video class 2 on how to cut a cross piece and join it. So for this you need a cord for making a cord piping, and then if you want you can change the presser foot to a single foot, or those who are comfortable with a double foot can just have the double foot and stitch. So put the cord at the center of the cross piece and now fold this. So now hold the cord piece, hold the cord and then just fold the cross piece in half and hold it tight, don't leave it loose. So you have to keep pulling the fabric behind. Don't pull it too tight. So hold the cross piece stiff so that you don't get it loose anywhere. So this is how you get. The cord piping would look like this after stitching. So after stitching, leave 1/4 inch of seam allowance and cut rest of the cross piece. So as I said earlier, I have the lining piece pinned to the right side of the main fabric. So the right side of the lining facing the right side of the main fabric. So now I'm going to attach the cord to the round arm at the hemline. So put the cord piping in between the main fabric and the lining, and now let us stitch all the layers together. After turning the lining to the wrong side, top stitch on the round arm. So with all the layers together, top stitch at the round arm and then secure the lining to the main fabric on all the sides and later cut out the extra. Don't forget to notch at the center of the sleeve, and similarly don't forget to mention the front and the back sleeve. So you can either mark it or you can have a notch to identify the front crown and the back crown. So first let us complete the back dart and the hemline. So for this, let us stitch the dart first. So fold the dart in half. So with the help of the pin, check whether the dart points match exactly without any difference. So this has to match exactly without any difference. So now stitch along the diagonal line. So it is merely optional to end the dart with a back stitch, but you see to it you don't overlap the stitches too much. Or if you don't want a back stitch, you can just continue the stitch and then go out 3/4 of an inch and then cut out the thread. So this thread has to remain on the dart in case if you're not giving a back stitch. Now press the darts towards the side seam. Let the dart face the side seam. Press it flat. So cut out a facing strip which is 2 inches in length and the width equal to the width of the hemline here. So this has to be equal to the width of the hemline and a little more. So now place the facing strip right side over right side. Place it right side over right side. So in such a way that the facing strip should extend out of the blouse. Don't match it exactly, let the facing strip extend out, and now stitch exactly on the hemline. So by matching the facing strip and the hemline of the blouse, you need to stitch exactly on the hemline. After joining the facing strip to the hemline of the blouse, turn it to the right side and give a top stitch only on the facing strip. So the top stitch is given only on the facing strip by pressing the seam allowance towards the facing strip. Now turn the garment to the wrong side, press the facing strip towards the wrong side, and now fold the seam allowance inside and press this flat along with the main fabric and hem it in position. So avoid missioning and hem it in position. You see to it this is minimum 3/4 inch to 1 inch broad. After completing the hemming, let us start with the front bodice. So let us first catch the underbust dart. So fold the dart in half. Pin it to check whether the darts match equally on both the sides. So now start stitching the underbust dart. So after stitching the underbust dart, now you need to make a small fold on the dart and then make a triangle fold again and stitch this in position. So this triangle should face the side seam. I'll repeat it one more time. So fold the underbust dart, make a small fold first and then make another fold so that you get a triangular edge, and stitch this in position. Stitch this dart in position so that this doesn't open out. So this is done just because when joining the waistband, the dart shouldn't get caught into the waistband. If this gets caught into the waistband, then there will be a pull at the bust point. So see to it the dart doesn't get caught into the waistband. Only a small portion here should get stitched into the waistband. So to avoid the pull, we are just making a small fold and another triangular fold, and now we are going to stitch here. So this should face the side seam. So let the dart face the side seam. So press it flat. Similarly, catch these two darts. So after catching the armhole dart and the center front dart, let us complete the waistband. So for this, you have to take the waistband which is stitched along with the main fabric, and then you need another layer of waistband. So you need totally 2 layers of waistband. And now, so I have marked F to indicate front, center front. So this front has to be attached to the center front here. So you need to match it like this. Similarly, you take another layer of this waistband and put it under. So similarly here I have marked F, which means this F is the center front, which has to be matched like this. So the main fabric, the blouse fabric, is in between the waistband. So while matching the waistband to the waistline here, you leave at least 1/4 of an inch. Let this fabric extend, the waistband extend out by at least 1/4 inch or 1/2 an inch, and then you need to start stitching from this point, the stitching line. The same way you need to match the other piece too. So the main fabric is in between the waistbands. So let us stitch all the layers together. So whatever the seam allowance is, you need to stitch exactly the same. See to that the dart face the side seam, the underbust dart. So all the 3 layers are stitched. So if you want to, you can give a top stitch on the waistband. So before giving a top stitch, if you feel you need to notch on this seam allowance here, you can notch it. So this is merely optional. So notching on the seam allowance is merely optional. So you need to press the waistband flat down and then stitch on the waistband. Give a top stitch on the waistband. So press it flat. Giving a top stitch is also merely optional. If you want to, you can give a stitch or you can avoid this. And now we need to complete the hemline of the waistband. So you can either directly fold the seam allowance of the main fabric and seam allowance of the other waistband, put it one over the other and give a top stitch. Give a top stitch. You can either do this method or you can open out the waistband like this and roll the main garment in between the two waistbands and then put it right side facing right side, and you can stitch the hemline straight down. So you can stitch it straight down and then pull it out through this gap. So we can either do this method or the other method. So here I'm just going to roll the seam allowance inside of the waistbands and I'm going to stitch it. So by doing this method, we have an advantage here, that is, in case if there's any difference, like you can open out and make adjustments. So if you want to, you can just pin it in position and complete the waistband. You see to it you are stitching on both the layers. So press it flat. See to that the center front is straight. Similarly, complete the other side too. After completing both the front pieces, so match at the center front to check whether the neckline matches, and then the dart and the waistband. So this should match without any difference. So before we start off with the neckline, you need to check all this. Similarly, match the sides of the blouse to check whether the side seam matches exactly without any difference. And now let us join the shoulders by putting it right side facing right side, and now we are going to complete the neckline using a cord piping. After joining the shoulders of the front and back on both the sides, we are going to complete the neckline using a cord piping. So here, cut out a cross piece for facing, cut out a cross piece, and then this is just like doing a facing, cross piece facing. That is, we are going to put it right side facing right side. You're going to stitch it with 1/4 inch of seam allowance, but then we're just going to add another layer of piping inside. So we are going to put it like this, and then place the cross piece over the piping, and then we are going to stitch exactly into the pit. So after completing the neckline, it is very important to clip into the seam allowance. You have to clip into the seam allowance, or you have to cut the seam allowance very close to the stitch. So this is very important. And then if you want, you can turn the facing piece to the wrong side and give a top stitch on this. So the top stitch has to go into the pit so that you don't see the top stitch. Otherwise, you can top stitch on the facing strip. So the top stitch is given on the facing strip and it is turned to the wrong side. So after turning it to the wrong side, you need to stretch the cross piece. Stretch the cross piece and later fold the seam allowance inside and put it flat on the main fabric. So this fold has to be either 1/4 inch or maximum could be 1/2 inch, but you see to it, it doesn't exceed 1/2 inch. So the lesser the fold, you will get a neat finish. If the fold is going to be broad, then you will get a pull at the curves. So you see to it, this fold is as narrow as possible, and it is very important to complete the raw edges with hemming. So first step is notching. Notching into the seam allowance is very important, and then giving a top stitch either on the cross piece or along with the main fabric, but it has to be given into the pit. And then stretching of cross piece is also equally important. Only when you stretch the cross piece will take the shape of the neckline and it will stay flat. You don't disturb the neckline, only the cross piece has to be stretched. And then fold the seam allowance inside. You see to that the fold doesn't exceed 1/2 inch. So this can be as narrow as possible. You can either take 1/4 inch fold or a 1/2 inch fold and hem it in position. The neckline is completed with hemming. So after completing the neckline, finish the center front with an extension and fold opening. So we can refer to class 3 video on how to do extension and fold, and complete hook and eye. So let us complete sleeve fixing. See to it, you match the front armhole to the front bodice. Similarly, the back armhole to the back bodice. So whatever the seam allowance is, we need to stitch exactly on the stitching line. So after joining the sleeves, we need to complete the side seam. So for this, first match the underarms together without any difference, and then pin it at regular intervals to check whether the side seams match exactly. So this is just like how we did on the dart. Pin it up at regular intervals and then stitch along the side seam. So measure half round arm and then complete the stitching. So while doing the side seam, never try to stretch the fabric to match to the sides. You pin it up to check whether the stitching lines match exactly. And now we have to give 2 more parallel stitches. before giving the parallel stitches, check out on the waistline whether you have the required waist measurement, and then give the other 2 rows of stitches. So when we fold the blouse in half, so leaving the extension, when you fold the blouse in half, the side seam should match without any difference. The side seam should match without any difference. Similarly, the darts should match without any difference. So in our next video, let us discuss on how to do a multicolor cord piping using 4 or 5 layers. Thank you for watching.